64.5 feet was the putt that J.J. Spaun made on 18. He didn't need to make that putt to finish 1 under par. He just needed a 2-putt, but it did add at least something positive on a day of total golf carnage. Good morning, everybody. Max is here with me. We've got a couple of guests scheduled. Maybe one more will be added to the mix, but Andrew Golden, who covers the Nats for the Washington Post, he'll be on with us at 12. So we'll save the Davey Martinez quotes about it not being the coach's fault for this long losing streak from the other night until 12. Andrew will jump on with us then. Ben will join us later on in the 12 o'clock hour, although we will talk football long before we get to Ben. And maybe, just maybe, we'll have one other guest, depending on his availability as he gets ready to fly down to Oklahoma City for tonight's Game 5, which I got to tell you, man, I am fired up to watch tonight. If you're not watching the NBA Finals, I'm sorry about that. You are missing an unbelievable, compelling sports competition drama. It is fabulous to watch. It is physical. It is relentless. It is intense. Game 4, amazing. Never saw it coming. Just like Game 1, never saw it coming. Tonight, Game 5 back in Oklahoma with an NBA Finals series tied at 2 games apiece. I'll get into my thoughts on tonight and go back to Friday night a little bit in just a bit. But I do want to start with the golf because I know a lot of you were watching this. What else was on? I mean, on Saturday, Caitlin Clark was lighting it up. I did flip on just in time to see the 3 threes in about 50 seconds or something like that, Max. She ended up with 32. She was amazing. But I did not stick with it the rest of the way. I was into the golf this weekend. And until yesterday, it really wasn't much. You know, you didn't have major names. You had names. Adam Scott, I was rooting for heading into the final round. He's been a class act his whole career, has not won a major since winning the Masters in 2013. He blew that big, lead that he had against at the British Open that year that Ernie Els ended up winning it. But look, the final round yesterday of the U.S. Open was one of those competitions that gets described in a way that isn't necessarily aesthetically pleasing. It's about, wow, that was a battle of wills. That was about surviving. That was a last man standing situation. It was riveting to watch. I thought it was. I didn't think the first 3 days were. Yesterday, when you throw in the rain and the standing water on the course, I mean, it was a total S show at times out there. I mean, Oakmont won the slugfest. J.J. Spaun ended up being the last man standing, and he's a great story if you haven't followed the story. He nearly won the Players' Championship back in March. He was a guy that thought about quitting golf as recently as a year or so ago. He was the only man in the draw to shoot under par. That may have been the biggest shocker of the final round, is that anybody over the last few hours finished under par, because it certainly seemed like a guy like Scotty Scheffler or John Rahm, who had gotten to the clubhouse at +4 before McIntyre got in there at +1, that they might even have a shot. Boy, Scheffler played well yesterday. He just couldn't make a putt. If a couple of those putts had gone in, Scotty Scheffler would have been there. Spaun didn't need that 64.5-foot putt on 18. It was an incredible putt. He got a read from Victor Hovland on the putt before. He ends up, finishing 1 under, the only man to finish under par. 2 shots better than Robert McIntyre. Look, when he lined up that putt, given that the rain was pelting down and there was water sort of gathering, you didn't know what to expect. Yeah, he got the read from Hovland. But at the same time, I mean, there were another 30 to 60 seconds worth of, raindrops that were hitting. Who knows? I mean, a 3-putt was in play, but he drained it, and he finished 1 under par. And it was sort of a nice little, hey, these guys can still do it on the final hole. Although really for J.J. Spaun, the moment for him was the tee shot on 17. That was really the moment in which it became not only possible, but probable that he would win the tournament without needing a 2-hole playoff, which would have been played today. Tirico, came on the air, I don't know, at about 7:30 and said, if there is a playoff necessary, it's not the old 18-hole playoff for the U.S. Open. They now do a 2-hole aggregate score playoff. Tirico said it would have been played this morning, not last night, because there was a 96-minute rain delay. Then there was more rain that followed, dark skies, sunset, approaching. They just barely got the final 4th round in, let alone had they had to gone, if it were McIntyre and Spawn, let's just say, signing scorecards, getting onto carts and going back to the tee box at 17. I don't even know what holes they would have played. I'm assuming it would have been 17 and 18. The course being soaked yesterday was a major factor in the tournament. And I want to pinpoint one moment in particular because I thought it was some major BS for Sam Burns. Sam Burns was the leader going into the final round yesterday. He was 4 under, had a 1-shot lead over Spawn and Adam Scott to start the day. He went to 15 with the lead at 1 over par, and he hit a decent drive that landed clearly in standing water. And for some reason, he wasn't given relief. And it mattered, man. It mattered big time. He hit a ball literally out of standing water. He ended up double bogeying 15, and he fell apart from that moment on. He voiced his disagreement with the ruling. Here's what he said afterwards about that moment.
And that's kind of the low part of the fairway there. When I walked into it, clearly could see water coming up, and took practice swings, and it's just, water splashing every single time. Called a rules official over. They disagreed. I looked at it again. I thought maybe I should get a second opinion. That rules official also disagreed. So at the end of the day, it's not up to me. It's up to the rules official, and that's kind of that.
I would have lost my mind in that moment. It was so obvious that was deeper standing water than other players had hit from. And it definitely impacted Sam Burns's last 4 holes. He ended up going double bogey, then he birdied 17 and bogeyed 18 to finish 4 over par and 5 shots out of it. Look, J.J. Spawn played great, and I don't think Sam Burns was going to get it back to 1 under par, more likely than not. There would have been more pressure. He probably goes on because the drive was in the fairway. Who knows what happens, really, but certainly would have had a better shot if he had gotten relief of making par on 15. And then, he probably goes to 18 even par, somewhere around there with a shot, but he was out of it. Thought that was a horrendous ruling. Come on, golf. Figure it out, man. Some of these things are so stupid. You can't hit out of a wading pool. It's not the way you hit golf shots. It was clear as day as he was taking those warm-ups that was deeper water than other players had. I don't understand that and won't understand that. But, look, it was, I don't know what you root for, you golfers. If you root for this at the U.S. Open, this is the one tournament where you can get this. Paul McGinley on Golf Channel, we had Steve Sands on the show on Wednesday, and I was telling him that McGinley the night before had predicted that if the course had firmed up and if they didn't get rain, that 10 over par could ultimately be the winning score. The course never really did firm up because they had rain, the last few days, and that kept conditions much softer. Didn't make the course that much easier because if the ball didn't stay in the fairway, you were in some ugly stuff. I mean, the rough and the bunkers were incredible. And there were some guys that played well. Rory, after basically, I thought, saying some things on Saturday about the media and the going back to the driver at the PGA, Rory's not happy these days. You would have thought that winning the Masters would have maybe opened up Pandora's box for him. It seems to have done the opposite. It seems to have sent him into a tizzy, but he played great yesterday. He and Rahm both shot 67 on a day in which shooting under par seemed impossible. Although McIntyre did it, we didn't see him basically the whole day until the very end, and there he was with a share of the lead, coming with Spawn on 17. I like it. I like to see them struggle. But, man, the rain really made it almost at times unplayable, it seemed like. But they slugged through it. It's golf, and there you go. I mean, you had guys basically, finish yesterday, playing all 4 rounds, shooting 20, 22, 24 over par for 4 days. Somebody shot, I think, a 90-something on day 2. Wasn't there a 90 that was shot on day 2? Am I thinking that he was at 90 and then maybe birdied 18 for 89, something like that? But anyway, there you go. U.S. Open talk. I know that some of you were into it. I was into it. I watched. The only golf I can sit there and watch for an all-day kind of a thing, which I did. And it was good. But Max, you were watching. What'd you think?
I was watching a lot at my grandfather's house because my internet was down all day yesterday. So that was a whole pain. So I got home and I had just updated my Twitter and JJ Spawn drained the 64-footer. But it was sloppy out there yesterday. It was the course that everybody talked up of being so hard decided to make itself even harder. And it was some great golf yesterday. I was locked in for as much as I could be.
Yeah, it was good. It was, look, it's June 15th. I don't know why the NBA doesn't play Game 5 last night. We should have had an NBA game last night.
Sure should have.
I don't know why they don't do that. It's Father's Day. You've got a captive audience. I don't know why they wait until Monday night, and they give the 2 days in between the travel. But anyway, it was good stuff. I mean, that's one of those courses that, a mid-handicapper, forget high handicappers, mid-handicappers are probably going to shoot 140, 130. You wouldn't even finish the round. It would be brutal. I don't know if that's a lot of fun. I know a lot of people that are like, I'd love to go there on Monday with the setup and go back to the tips. Why? Why would you want to do that to yourself? You're not testing yourself. You're not going to be successful. But anyway, there you go. U.S. Open. All right. So there's so much that we had over the weekend. We had some stories about the stadium and the current, state of the city council. And what's going on there. It's going to be interesting. There's a deadline for the vote. They can't blow this, can they? I guess they could blow it. I can't imagine the team isn't going to give them ample time to get this done. And while that's going on, we had over the weekend the first football championship this city's had since 1991.
Did it, Kev?
Congratulations to the DC Defenders. They won the UFL championship, bringing home a football championship, if you care, to the city for the first time since, of course, the 91 Skins. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I followed this or watched it even, because I didn't. I saw on social media the congratulations for the Washington Defenders and their title in a big championship win. Good for them. They beat 58-34. I believe it was the Michigan Panthers in the championship game. They outscored Michigan in the second quarter, 31-6. So good for the DC Defenders and their UFL championship.
Jordan Ta'amu, by the way, 388, 4 touchdowns. He was balling.
I see a lot of the, social media. I was looking at it, I guess, yesterday morning. Did you watch the game?
I watched bits and pieces. I was flipping back and forth between
bits and pieces of the championship game.
I mean, so it's Stanley Cup Finals going on.
You didn't really care that much going in either.
I mean, no, it's the UF. It's not the NFL championship. It's the UFL championship.
Right.
But
I saw a lot of, I don't know. It seemed like manufactured, trying really hard levels of excitement on social media.
Yeah, I did notice that
from
as well.
People that I would probably wager big money had not seen one moment of any game before the championship game and probably didn't even watch the whole championship game. When was it on? It was on Saturday night?
Yes. Saturday at like 8 or o'clock.
It was Saturday at 8 o'clock?
Yeah.
Was it on a network of note?
Yeah, it was on ABC.
It was on ABC?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Congrats to the DC Defenders. Oh, here's a question for you. Is Greg Williams still the defensive coordinator?
No, because I'm pretty sure the big story with the DC Defenders was before the season, their coaching staff all left for new jobs. So that's
new jobs like going to, some sort of office job,
like NFL coaching positions and things like that.
NFL coaching positions?
No, not accounting. No, nothing like that.
Mm-hmm. It was quite the offensive explosion. That's for sure. 58 points, I think I read, was the highest total points ever in a UFL game. I believe that's what I read. And like you said, the quarterback, who I think was the quarterback when I went to a game last year, because I went to a playoff game against Seattle last year or 2 years ago.
Probably last year.
Ended up trying to talk with at the time, the guy that was the general manager of the team, because he was sitting literally right next to me. And I recognized him, started to talk to him, and he wasn't paying attention because he had the headset on and the game was going on.
He was locked in.
He was locked in. It was, God, I'm blanking on the guy's name. I've had him on the show. He's a great guest. Starting to happen. Blanking on things. Anyway, congrats to the DC Defenders. It's fantastic for all of the players and all of the owners. We know one of the owners. Tommy and I know one of the owners. I don't know if they still own it, but they took us to a game last year or 2 years ago, playoff game. Audi Field's a great place to see a game. Is that where they still play? I'm assuming that's where it is. Where was the championship game?
It was in St. Louis.
In St. Louis.
Mm-hmm. They had
but they played Michigan.
Yeah, so they played the conference championships in St. Louis, and then the championship game was a week later.
Yeah. Congrats. It's awesome. Okay, when we come back, I do want to talk some NBA Finals. I want to talk about Game 4 from Friday night. This is an incredibly unique basketball pro style series, and I'll explain why when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
what makes Alex very good is that he's able to figure out what we need and be that. Makes big shots, and then obviously defense speaks for itself. But he's just really smart, so he's kind of like our feeling. Like he does a really good job of just seeing what the game needs and then doing it at 100%, which is hard to do since he's like 100. So, yeah, he's just like he's just our glue, on that end of the floor. And then defensively, he's been special, and he'll continue to be that for sure.
Talking about Alex Caruso. Who was that? I didn't catch who you said.
That was Jalen Williams on Alex Caruso.
That was Jalen Williams. Got it. Jalen Williams talking about 100-year-old Alex Caruso. I think he mentioned Alex Caruso, the one champion on Oklahoma City's roster. He won the title with the Lakers back in the bubble during COVID in 2020. He was outstanding the other night. So Game 5 tonight, NBA Finals. I mean, 2-2. What else, do you want if you're into this? But a series that has, a pivotal Game 5. This is, one of those where the numbers say in a 2-2 series, if you win Game 5, you go on to win the series 82% of the time. So crucial tonight. Oklahoma City's a 9.5-point favorite. They were an 11.5-point favorite in Game 2. They were a 6.5-point favorite on Friday night and covered by a half point, which was crazy. So I'll talk about tonight here in a moment. Look, you got to watch this if you're not watching it, people. This is true captivating sports drama theater. This is the best of the best. I'm a college basketball guy. Many of you know that, but the games are completely different. I mean, these players are just a million times better. The game is played at a much higher level. And when they play like they play in the playoffs, where they're playing every possession as if it's do or die, it just makes for incredible, I think, sports drama. Look, this has been a series in which the games have been officiated in different ways. I can't stand Scott Foster. I do not think the game Friday night was one-sided officiated. That is the cries of Indiana fans. The foul count was exactly the same. And in fact, going into the last couple of fouls when Indiana was forced to foul at the very end of the game, Oklahoma City at that point had been called for more fouls than Indiana. They ended up with one less foul for the entire game. And only 5 more free throw attempts. And again, they had some free throws there at the end because Indiana had to foul when they were down multiple scores. There's something that is very, very different about these NBA finals as I've watched them. I have referenced it, but the other night, I don't recall watching an NBA game where this was happening. And I'll tell you what this is in just a few minutes. I think it's the first time I've ever watched this happen in an NBA game. So on Friday night, it was like Game 1 in which I'm watching the entire game and I'm like, wow, Indiana's got them. They got them. They're going to win this game. They're going to take a 3-1 series lead. And to be honest with you, there were moments in Game 4 on Friday night where I thought, Oklahoma City's not only not going to win this game, they look done. They look done. I kept saying, I was watching the game with my middle son, and I said, I was wrong. I was just dead wrong. Indiana is good. And they are as good, if not maybe better. And they're going to win this series. Oklahoma City looks shot. Could they come back from 3-1 down? Yeah, they could. But it doesn't look like they're going to. They just haven't figured it out. And Indiana's matching Oklahoma City's defense. Game 1 was similar in that Oklahoma City was such the dominant team for 45 out of the 48 minutes. And then somehow Indiana came back in the final 3 minutes and won that game. It was stunning. It was like, okay, they earned it. They did. But, man, I never saw that coming. And Friday night was similar in that I was resigned to, Indiana's really good. And by the way, even though they lost the game on Friday night and Oklahoma City came back, these are 2 even teams. I was definitely wrong heading into this series, as were the odds makers who had Oklahoma City as like the 5th largest favorite going into the NBA Finals in NBA history. I thought Oklahoma City's defense was just too much, and I thought Indiana had seen a poor defensive team in the Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals, another poor, defensive team in Cleveland along the way, and that it was just going to be night and day, and they weren't going to be able to deal with it. And they couldn't deal with it for much of game one and won game one. And there have been moments in which they haven't been able to deal with it, no doubt. But these are two dead even teams, man. Indiana's not done. They could easily win 2 out of the final 3, winning at least a game. They'd have to in Oklahoma against the Thunder. And I think the Thunder can win 2 out of the final 3. This is dead even. It's what you want. To me, I mean, Oklahoma City's pretty hefty favorite. They are tonight and for the series. I don't know. I would not wager on Oklahoma City to win it. I wouldn't wager on Indiana to win it at this point, even though you're getting a good number on the comeback. I just think that these are 2 excellent basketball teams. The big difference for me is that Rick Carlisle's a much better coach than Mark Daigneault. Much better coach. Oklahoma City just is not very structured offensively when they need to be. It is a lot of just relying on their playmaking ability. They rely on their defense to generate a lot of their offense. And the other night, they relied on the MVP to take them home. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was sensational. Ended up taking over in the fourth quarter, ended up with 35 points on 50% shooting from the floor, hitting some difficult shots. The 3 that he hit that cut a 4-point lead to 1, I thought was massive in the game. Does he get away with things? Yeah, like every superstar does. Gets away with a couple of pushes, maybe an extra, half step. He was incredible, clutch. He had not been clutch, really, in this series. Halliburton had been the clutch player at the end of games. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander brought his team home in a game they pretty much had to have almost by himself. Now, the defense down the stretch, they outscored Indiana 12-1 down the stretch. It was their defense on the other end. They got stops. They got rebounds. I mean, you had Chet Holmgren with a big block shot. He was moving his feet defensively. He was great. They were great defensively. And I think as much as SGA was great down the stretch, Oklahoma City's defense ultimately ended up giving them the chance to win that game. Alex Caruso's a big part of that. They're just excellent defensively. Here's the thing that is totally unique in watching an NBA game, by the way, at any time during the course of a season, I can't imagine, I cannot imagine that 2 teams in the NBA full court pressure each other for 48 minutes. Full court pressing. You don't see that in the NBA. You just don't. Yeah, you'll see them pick up man-to-man, picking up, right around the 3/4 court mark. They're both teams in flat out man-to-man, occasionally trapping out of the man-to-man, full court press for 48. It's crazy. And it is physically exhausting. And something I talked about after game 3, I said, Mark Daigneault has to use somebody else to bring the ball up against Indiana's pressure because SGA is getting completely worn out doing it. And he did. That was the change he made. That was specific. Specifically the change that I thought they had to make. You cannot let SGA be the primary ball handler against full court pressure. And they didn't. They had Jalen Williams bringing it up. They had their bigs bringing it up. They had Dort bringing it up. They had Caruso bringing it up when he was in the game. Can't let SGA get physically, drained with ball handling responsibilities. And they did that. That was the one major adjustment that I thought they needed to make. They did make that, and it was a difference maker. They rested SGA early, too. He ended up playing a few minutes less in the game than he had in the previous game. But I think the lack of needing to bring the ball up against full court pressure, Nembhard in particular, was a great move. But I still think Carlisle and his team is much better in the half court. Can't wait for tonight. I think, look, threes have ended up being a big part of this series, right? Although it wasn't the other night, which was ironic because Oklahoma City won a game in which they made 3 threes. They were 3 for 16. They were 1 for 12 in the first half. And Indiana made 11 for 36, but 11 for 36 is what, 30%, 31%, 32, 31%, 30.6%. There you go. I still got it a little bit. 30.6% from behind the arc. That's not good enough for them. They got to make more threes. And I think that's the key tonight. I think, turnovers obviously are a big key, grabbing extra possessions. But, can Indiana, make 36, 37, 38, 40% of their three-point attempts, many of which will be contested. It is kind of amazing, though, that OKC won a game making 3 of 16 from behind the arc. Great, great NBA Finals. A memorable NBA Finals so far. I don't care about the market sizes. I don't care at all. All right, Scott Van Pelt's going to join us next. We'll talk NBA Finals. We'll talk U.S. Open and more.
All right, yesterday, the Boston Red Sox traded away slugger third baseman Rafael Devers to the San Francisco Giants in exchange for 3 pitchers, Kyle Harrison, Jordan Hicks, and minor league pitcher Jose Bello. Also included in the deal, outfield prospect James Tibbs. The Red Sox also sent Kyle Harrison down to AAA Worcester. J.J. Spawn wins his first career major with a monster 64-foot putt after a soggy day at Oakmont. That's the longest putt made of the day. Again, Spawn wins the U.S. Open. Shohei Ohtani will make his pitching debut tonight versus the Padres. This is 21 months removed from a second UCL surgery. Ohtani will likely only pitch 1 or 2 innings tonight as a continuation of his rehab. The Washington Nationals have dropped 8 in a row following a sweep by the Miami Marlins. They will take on the Colorado Rockies tonight on 106.7 The Fan at 6:45. Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 6:15. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports, and that is what's trending.
important question for the balds out there. It's got to be every game, right?
Yeah, every game day.
But then in between, will you let it get a little bit?
Yeah, a little stubble.
Yeah, see, I messed up and didn't do it today, but I'm not nearly as
he's laughing at you.
I'm not nearly as important. Well, look, he's over there. He's going to come on late and do whatever he does. If he ate a steak, he got here late. Don't worry about him. Congratulations, a tremendous fight tonight. We look forward to seeing you in your place on Monday night.
Appreciate it, man.
Yes, indeed. Thanks so much.
And that was Scott with Alex Caruso on Friday night after Game 5. Who was he asking about? Was that Steve he was asking about? Who was he? Who are you referencing there at the end? Do we have Scott?
We do.
I can't hear him. You there?
You can't hear me?
I got you now.
Yeah, no. I was talking about Stanford Steve, who is waiting in the wings to come on, and he knows Alex as well. So we, just because that goes back years where I didn't try to shame Alex. I just explained to him we all arrive at this place on our own, meaning shaving your head, and he was a little late to the party, but he got here, and we were just comparing notes there. Very important journalism there late in the interview.
Yes, it was at the very end, but I've told you this, you're at these NBA Finals games live, which I think is new. You haven't done this in the last few years, correct?
No, this is the first time.
And I think these interviews, you had Halliburton on, you had SGA on after Game 2. I think it was Game 2. You had Caruso on, you had Aaron Wiggins on. I think that they're really, I've told you this, I'm not, whatever. I'm not exactly objective when it comes to things Scott does, but I think they're really good. And I'm wondering if you think being there in person makes a huge difference.
No question. The whole reason that we did this was for that very, literally for those conversations, Kevin, because the difference that you have in a conversation when you're face to face with somebody, as opposed to just sort of this, this voice in the ether when they're staring into a camera, is different. And other than Wiggins, who I'd met at Maryland, like I'd never met any of these people face to face. Where would I have ever seen them? And so just the ability to be in the building, to sit face to face, and I've really enjoyed the conversations just because I think, I don't know, I tend to have a different sort of a conversation. The way I go about it is not as formal, I don't think. It's not like like formal dancing where I do the 2 steps and then you answer and then I do. And you know what I'm saying? I feel like 100%. It's way more kind of more free flowing. And so it's a whole bunch of travel. We're going to get on a plane here in a little bit, go to Oklahoma City, but so be it. It's great fun.
I said something last week, and I forget if I've mentioned this to you or not. Oklahoma City's a very young team, but every single interview I've watched with anybody, including those with you, they come off as a very mature group. Or maybe it's just that they are very good interviews. Jalen Williams is a good interview. SGA is a good interview. I think Holmgren is actually somewhat thoughtful. Caruso's great. Have you sensed the same thing?
1,000%. And it goes back to Presti, the way everyone has explained it to me. They're looking for a specific kind of person. Player, sure. That if you can, Kevin, I think you and I are lovely folks, but I don't think they want either of us in a late game scenario on the floor taking a shot. We're probably not super helpful. But they're looking for excellent players, but who fit a certain kind of mental DNA. And every one of them has told me over and over again that this camaraderie that you see, this connection that you see is a real thing, to the point that, on off nights when other games were going on and it was, before they reached the finals, as guys are hanging out together at night, you work with people, but then you might like them fine at work. But then like when the 5 o'clock hits, you're going to go your way and I'm going to go mine. I'll see you tomorrow at work. Well, these guys are really together a lot. And so, no, it's not like they're performative. It's not like they're just really good at the Q&A. That's just kind of, I think, how they're constructed. And it's been really, really impressive. But I'd be quick to add that Indiana has had a very sort of similar approach, and how they've tried to look for certain people, and how Pascal Siakam has fit in, and how, they're an awfully connected and mature bunch as well. Halliburton, I've been just so impressed with his whole constitution. So I don't know. I feel like this is a wonderful kind of a couple weeks period for the NBA to have brand new teams and stars, on the stage, because one of them is going to win and could be a big part of the future of the league.
You know how much I've enjoyed this so far. I can't wait for tonight. You've been there for all 4 games. Just describe the intensity of these games and the physicality, if that's even a word. There's just something that is popping when you watch it on TV that just speaks to kind of the highest levels of sort of urgent competition. You've been there for the 4 games. What's it been like?
Yep. Unreal. And the atmospheres in both Indiana. I mean, what's the line about Indiana? In 49 states, it's just basketball, but this is Indiana, right? Like it matters so much to that state. And then in Oklahoma City, it's the only game in town, right? And so the atmospheres, I think, fuel it. But then the fact that there's so little separation, but other than game 2, where Oklahoma City just largely kept the Pacers at bay, both games in Indiana were insane levels of just back and forth, and you can't put Oklahoma City down. But then the Pacers aren't going to just blink if they lose a lead. And unfortunately, the last sort of 30 seconds on Friday night turned into this wild sequence of intentional fouling and Mathurin missing free throws. And it took so much of the edge off of what had been yet another incredibly intense physical battle that the end felt flat, which was unfortunate, because the game up until that last sort of 30 seconds was just as you describe it.
Well, it did get it to an Oklahoma City half-point cover with some of those missed free throws.
Yeah, that was wild. That was a pretty excruciating beat if you're on the home team, because they were never not the right side until there were zeros on the clock, which, as you and I know, that's really the only time it matters.
It only matters then. But I talked about it earlier in the show that, like game 1, they're different in terms of the way it played out, but I never thought for pretty much the majority of the game that Indiana wouldn't win. And in fact, at one point during the game, I said to Corbin, I'm like, I think Oklahoma City's done. I think this is it. And I was shocked by that, because I really thought Oklahoma City was the better team coming in, but it didn't end up that way on Friday night. Why?
No. Halliburton finally made a shot. I thought, and I asked Doris Burke about this afterwards, we tend to, at the end of a game,
you mean SGA knocked down that 3 you're talking about?
Yes, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander hit a 3 late to cut. I beg your pardon. Thank you.
Yep.
Cut the lead from 4-1.
Yep.
And then he hit a bucket that gave him the lead, where he extends that arm and then he took 3 steps. I felt like you could have called anything there, and nothing was called. Indiana people were livid. I don't blame them. Something happened there, and they just play on. But you focus on that, and then you miss what happened at the end of the third quarter. And that's 12 minutes away from the finish line. I don't care. It's a 10-point lead. Toppin got fouled, went to the line, missed 2.
Yeah.
Siakam had a shot that could have pushed it to 12. It might have been a 3, could have been 13. No, he got fouled late in the quarter, had 2, missed 1. So what I'm getting at, Kevin, is that they had a chance to push that lead into the 12, maybe 14, and I don't think that the Thunder would have just crumbled or tapped out. I think they'd have fought, but 14-point lead is a whole lot different than 7. I mean, it's double the lead, and even if it's 12, just mentally it feels further away, and they weren't able to close the third strong, and it allowed that crack. And then in the blink of an eye, it's down to a 4-point game, and then 4 points late, and then Halliburton, I keep saying Halliburton, SGA finally hit a 3, only one he made the whole night, and now it's a 1-possession game, and now it's there to be stolen. I'd say on balance that the bookkeeping feels about right, because I don't think the Pacers were better in game 1, but they won. I don't think the Thunder were better in game 4, but they won. So 2-2 feels honestly like about the right kind of ledger here, more than halfway through.
Yeah, with to me, any outcome possible here over the final 3. What do you think? Final 2 or 3? Yeah,
I mean, I'm done dating. I'm done doubting the Pacers. I just. Cleveland, they've been really good. Well, they beat the crap out of Cleveland. Sent Milwaukee home quickly. They out battled the Knicks, and they're tied up here. So I'm not doubting them. But I've been in that building now in Oklahoma twice, and will be again tonight. And they've got to win one there, either here or Game 7. And I wouldn't want to stay in the habit of having to steal them late against that Thunder team, which means they're going to have to play a game where they're toe to toe and don't fall behind and don't have to rely on, a fourth quarter where the Thunder don't make any shots at all, because they didn't make any threes in the fourth quarter of either of their losses, and they only had one the other night.
Yeah.
I think the Thunder. This is what I felt throughout. I just think the Thunder are the better team. 4 games in, I'd say it's very fractional. But having 2 of the 3 at home, I feel like that building's going to make enough of a difference for them to get the 2 that they need. So I assume it's the Thunder. I don't know if it'll be, Thursday or I guess Sunday.
All right, let's talk golf real quickly. And I just read your tweet, and I talked about this at the beginning of the show. I can't believe they didn't give Sam Burns some relief on 15. But before we get to that, tell everybody, a lot of these guys, the JJ Spawn story, was that a popular win yesterday?
Monster. He's such a good guy, and he's an excellent player, Kevin. He's one of these guys that was great as a junior, but then had ended up having a walk-on at San Diego State. Colt Knost, who does has a podcast, very popular podcast, and of course is on CBS's broadcast. But he and I were texting late last night, and he was just so happy for JJ because he's just a really well-liked guy. And he told me in a text form a story of playing with him in Canada one year, and he said guy shot 67 and flushed it, like golf term, like hit it great all day, shot 67. And he said, I walked off. I'm like, how do you not have? Aren't you on the PGA Tour? He's like, he just didn't know how good he was. And, he got a breakthrough win a couple years ago in San Antonio. And so now he's a winner, and that changes things. If you're a week in, week out golf watcher, you know that he hit a putt on 18 at Sawgrass that if it rolls one more time, he wins that and beats Rory. But he didn't, and he ended up losing in a playoff. And he said last night on the Golf Channel how much that experience helped him. It's very, very popular. And, yeah, I get it. He's not the star name. And it could have been anybody late on Sunday, but he stood up as tall as you can and hit those 2 shots on 17 and 18, Kevin. Yeah. That's just big, big balls, because Oakmont is a scary place. And when it had to be done, he delivered as strong as you possibly can. So thrilled for the guy. I thought he was great on a day when being great was damn near impossible.
Yeah, I mean, I at the beginning of the show, I said this is one of those, sporting events that you describe in terms of surviving and, last man standing. Like, it was carnage. I actually kind of enjoy it, although the weather really made that course difficult when they came back. I know the break, he says, helped him a lot. But God, I just saw your tweet as you were talking about NBA, and you tweeted out about Burns asking for relief on 15 when he's 1 over and he's got a share of the lead, and you said I'd have been arrested. I can't believe he didn't get relief. That was a lot of water to hit out of.
It was, and because I do golf, I'm very familiar with what we call golf Twitter, and it's a tough room. I'll just put it that way. So I tweeted that, and I had a bunch of players respond to me either on Twitter or by text, like the exact same thing. There's a lot of those rules McJohnnies out there that love to say, well, actually it's where your stance is, and the water wasn't coming up. And I'm just like, listen, man, do me a favor and shut up, because the golf course was completely saturated. And the players that I texted with afterwards were like, it was borderline unplayable. Like, it was that wet. Adam Scott spoke afterwards. He hit that shot on 11 that just the ball flew a mile offline. It's because his club like hydroplaned through the water. And so, look, 2 rules officials came over, and in their estimation, there wasn't enough water. But I had a big-time player tell me last night, if that's a regular tour event, you don't even ask for a rules official. You just look at the guy will go, yeah, it's a 10 out of 10 relief. No questions asked. No questions asked. That's how much water there was. Again, 2 rules officials there on the ground deemed it not to be. And I thought Burns handled it incredibly well after the fact. He described what happened, and he said, that's pretty much that. Now, he had to have been furious, I think anyone would have been, because again, the course at that point was so wet that it was not unplayable, but there were parts of it that were, and other players, Kevin, were getting relief from lies and situations that didn't appear to be nearly as wet. So that's the part that I find difficult, is it's so arbitrary. Oh, no, you get relief. Well, you don't. I don't? And I mean, I think you kind of like officiating in any sport. Do you apply the situation? Like if a guy's 13 over, well, yeah, you get relief. But you're +1, I don't know. I mean, let's consider the situation, how important the weight of that next shot was massive. And it wasn't going to be an easy shot anyway. So listen, the good news is Spawn does what he does late, and that changes the conversation from being entirely about how Sam Burns got screwed in the estimation of many to, hey, J.J. Spawn had incredible birdie finish to win the U.S. Open.
Yeah, I mean, of course, he ends up draining the 64.5-foot putt, but Burns fell apart after that. I mean, he double bogeyed, then bogeyed, and I think he would have certainly gone to 18 with at least a chance, maybe. Who knows?
Maybe.
Because everybody was falling apart except for Spawn at the end. One more on the Open. What did you make of Rory's weekend, and then what he said on Saturday about some of his frustration with media?
I'm just baffled at the moment. You know, I'm baffled. I think you and I have talked a lot about this, whether it's been on the air or not. I honestly don't remember. But Rory's always been one of my very favorite players, just because I think he's an interesting man. He's a thinker. He's a reader. He's kind of always been sort of searching. Just in life, right? For how do you get better? How do you just sort of become a more evolve as a human being? And I'm sincere about that. Like, he's just an impressive dude. And he's always been there for the media. And maybe he's just like, he's reached the point where he's had enough. I know he was pissed about the way the thing leaked out about his driver, considering that Scotty's driver at Quail Hollow also failed. But it turned into this whole, Rory cheated at the Masters. No, he didn't. Like this, the clubs are non-conforming. It's this whole test, and I don't want to bore you or your listeners. Yeah. But I'm saying all of that to say this: like, his demeanor at the moment is so off-putting, because he just seems like he's so pissed at everybody,
right?
And he's like, he's just coming off so poorly for a guy who's always come off, I think, so well. And I don't know. It leads to people speculating something wrong in his life. Did he climb the mountain? He said afterwards, like he climbed his Everest and now he's sort of trying to come down the mountain. I get that. I mean, but I don't. I've never done it. So I don't know if there's just a lot of kind of mental, hurdles you're trying to get over to figure out, what am I doing next? What's my next mountain to climb? I have no idea. I just know that when you're like, I just want to play in 4.5 hours and get out of here, and you guys are frustrated. I mean, he's earned the right to be honest, certainly. And I don't want to see him squander all this goodwill. I just wonder how he's acted since Quail Hollow, and it's been a series of events that seem very unlike him, and it has people wondering, like, what's the story? And I don't have any. I can't illuminate it. I just think it's been odd.
Meantime, he went out and shot, with Rahm the best round,
67, I believe, right?
Yeah, 67. To finish up. All right. Thanks for doing this. Have a good flight. I'll see you tonight, or I'll watch tonight. Talk to you tomorrow. Thanks.
Thanks. I'll wave at you. Thanks for having me.
Scott Van Pelt, everybody, heading down to Oklahoma City for Game 5 tonight, where he will do his Sports Center following Game 5 on ESPN. That's the post game worth watching, because Legler comes on with him to kind of break down the game right when it's over. Then he'll get, the star of the game from either team. And then, a bunch of ESPN people follow before Legler comes back, which, look, Legs is the best analyst there is when it comes to this. There appears to be an issue brewing with RFK. I'll explain when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. What's up, Joe? All right, this from the Washington Post. I think others have reported on this too, but I'm going to read from the Washington Post in the story that Jenny Gathright wrote over the weekend, a story titled DC Council members say stadium approval is likely, but they need more time. And the mayor doesn't want to give them more time. But she says it's because the team is upset. Here's the first paragraph or two. DC Council members are working toward approving a football stadium for the Washington Commanders at the shuttered RFK Stadium site, but probably not by Mayor Muriel Bowser's July deadline, several lawmakers said this week. The prospect of the council delaying a vote on the $3.7 billion deal has the team, quote, outraged, closed quote, Bowser said this week, and, quote, sacrifices our exclusive seat at the table and $2.7 billion in private investment, closed quote. Bowser has wanted the council to approve the deal with the Commanders as part of the council's fiscal year 2026 budget process. And the Commanders said this week that any delay beyond that threatens the team's construction timeline. Council members argue that it's only fair that they take more time to consider a deal that involves more than $1 billion in taxpayer funds, especially since they said they still lacked key information, such as a full explanation of the Bowser administration's revenue projections for the project and an analysis of how much the proposed tax exemptions for the Commanders will cost the city. So this is something that now should be frustrating to everybody. It was April 28th that they held this press conference, which felt very much like a victory celebration. But we had Phil Mendelson on shortly after that, and he said it's far from that. In fact, it's very premature, and they needed a lot more information before they could vote on it. And since that, few day period in late April, early May, we've seen some stories. It's now June 16th. We are about a week and a half away from the 2-month mark from this announcement. Hey, people, get to work. Hammer this thing out. Close the doors until the mayor gives you all the information and you digest all the information and can vote on it. There's a quote in here from one of the at-large council members. Let me find it. Essentially saying that the team's not going to do anything. They're fine. They're fine if this gets delayed. We've talked to the team. They're okay. Well, the mayor describes the team as being outraged, and that this delay, if they don't vote on the RFK part of the 2026 budget, because there's talk about voting for the budget itself within the time frame, but then separating out the RFK piece to be determined over a couple of months. This is what Christina Henderson said. She is an independent at large on the council. The mayor thinks that her deal's perfect, and that's great for her. I feel like there are areas where we can certainly improve. Well, do it. God, sometimes people in these positions, God, if this were, so many of you know this, right? You got a big client. They're hanging on a proposal. They've asked you to go back and rework the proposal a little bit, but they're on a timeline. They got to pick somebody to handle it for them. And you're in there sun up to sundown, weekends, weekdays, doesn't matter until you figure it out. Not every walk of life appears to operate under that premise, under those rules. Like, hey, we're here to get it done and get it done quickly. Vacations be damned. Floating holidays be damned. 2-hour lunch breaks be damned. And I'll tell you what, guys like Josh Harris and Mark Ein and Mitch Rales, they're probably back there going, you've got to be kidding me. We're coming up on 2 months and they don't have what they need to make a decision and vote? We would have had this thing done in a weekend. Yeah, it's frustrating. I can only imagine. And look, I'm not suggesting it's all on the council. They say that they don't have all the information they need. Well, get them the information, lock yourselves in a room for a weekend, and get it done. You know, the team at this point, look, we all know they want DC. We know they want RFK, but they need to start the process. The construction needs to begin. They want to be there in 2030. They want to have a chance to have the 2031 FIFA Women's World Cup be played in their new stadium. You can't commit to that unless you know you are going to have the stadium done. This is, I don't know. I hate to, put it in these terms, but sometimes government is just slow and just not anywhere near sort of the same level of urgency that many of you would be forced to work under in this situation. It's been since April 28th. Figure it out, people. How do you get to the point where either the council doesn't have all the information they've asked for, or the council hasn't gotten around to digesting it enough and understanding it enough to vote on it? You know, if they don't make this a part of the vote and they try to push it off and just think, oh, guys, they want DC. They want RFK. On some level, even though I want RFK and we all want RFK, I mean, at that point, Josh Harris and company should immediately head back to Maryland and start negotiations with Maryland. Put the pressure on DC. I don't know if they'd even understand it or feel it, but you got July 15th is a deadline. Voting on the deal by July 15th is something that Bowser negotiated with the team. That was part of the term sheet between the two parties. July 15th is the deadline for a council vote. And that deal says the team would no longer exclusively negotiate with the city if the council did not vote on the deal by then, or if the council materially changed the deal's terms. Now, we know we had Phil Mendelson on the show, a couple of days after the April 28th press conference. And, I'm all for the council trying to get an even better deal for the citizens of the District of Columbia, of which I am one. Go ahead, see what you can, get done. See if you can haggle, a few extra dollars, a few extra things that benefit the city from this deal. And it certainly sounded like there were conversations between the team and members of the city council. But, there are businesses, many of you are working in currently, and I guarantee you Josh Harris, Mark Ein, and Mitch Rails have been a part of, and many on that limited partner group, ownership group, where they're just like, good God, can you guys lock yourselves in a room and get this done? We'd have had this thing wrapped up in 48 hours. But it's not necessarily the pace in which sometimes you get government to work at. Let's hope it works out. But it certainly, look, I'd still wager that it will get done, but maybe it's going to have to get done with a little bit of, forced leverage by the team, like going back to Maryland after July 15th, if it doesn't get voted on by then. We'll see. Hopefully they get it together. I mean, July 15th is a month from now. They still have a month to get all the information they need so that they can vote on this thing. I mean, 4 full weeks. Okay? People can be on vacation. You can Zoom. You can send them the information. You can have conversations to figure it out. Oh, man. They'd lose a lot of valuable clients operating this way. All right. We'll get to some football discussion next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. All right, so that period of post-draft, post-free agency, and post-team workouts, mini camps, OTAs, and now we're in that 5-week period before training camp begins. We have had an off season, and we can start to guess on a few things. I think it's pretty dangerous to guess on anything or be really conclusive about anything. If you've followed the NFL for as long as most of us have, you understand that you probably don't have an understanding of what players are or what teams are this time of year, but I'm going to take a shot at it anyway. I'm going to give you a couple of things that I think we know about this team heading into 2025. That would be the Commanders. And I'm going to give you a couple of things that I think we are unsure of at this point heading into 2025. Let's start with the positive. What do we know about this team? And I'm talking about, obvious things that, aren't really that debatable. We know that this team has a really good quarterback. We know that. They got a really good quarterback in Jaden Daniels. I also think we know that this team has a really good coaching staff, a really good head coach, elite level, who knows, but really good. Very good coordinator, certainly on the offensive side. And then when it comes to kind of the personnel, I think we certainly have a sense right now that offensive line is improved, that the O-line's got a chance to be an improved area of the team. They obviously traded for Laramie Tunsil, one of the best pass blocking left tackles in the game, one of the best all-around left tackles in the game, period. They drafted a guy that we've heard very good things about so far. Doesn't mean it'll hold up when the real games begin. But drafting Josh Connerly Jr. gives them a chance to open up the season with two totally different tackles. A left tackle in Tunsil, a right tackle in Connerly Jr. And by the way, a move of Brandon Coleman to left guard, taking over eventually when Cosme comes back for Nick Allegretti, who struggled at times last year, especially pass blocking wise. So I do think what we know about this team now entering this 6 weeks of quiet, 5 weeks of quiet before training camp begins and before we get into, the countdown to the first preseason game. Got a quarterback. We knew that. Have a coaching staff that's pretty solid. We've known that. The offensive line should be better. It should be not only better, it should be pretty good. It should be massively improved. They have an elite left tackle. They have a right tackle that they think has a chance to be really good. He's a rookie, so it may take time. And they've shifted around some things to maybe cover up a weakness in Allegretti that they may be moving on from, once 2025 is in the books. So I think we know that the O-line is improved and should be better. We also know that they are bigger on defense up front. I don't know how that manifests itself. We don't know the answer to that. But we do know that they made a conscious effort to go out and get bigger people on defense up front. Javon Kinlaw, Eddie Goldman, and then, combined with what they hope they have coming back in Deron Payne, who they spoke very highly of early in the minicamp and the OTA period. They wanted to get bigger because the bully in the division and the bully in the conference is massively big, and very physical up front, the Philadelphia Eagles. And by the way, they like to run the football with not just the best running back in the game, but they like to run it with their quarterback as well. And they do play and have resorted to bully ball at times against our team at various points during the 3 games that we played against Philadelphia last year. So one of the things we know is they made a conscious effort to get bigger on defense. And they did. They got bigger on defense up front. Lastly, things that we know is that they should be more talented at corner. This was something Ben mentioned, when he was on last week. He's like, look, just compare it to last year, guys like Mike Davis and Benjamin St-Juste, et cetera, right? They added, a guy in the second round of the draft in Trey Amos, who could have easily gone at some point in the first round. They added Jonathan Jones, a veteran corner. They brought back their best inside corner in Noah Igbenogany. They've got Sanders still coming back, and of course, I think the big wild card here is Marshawn Lattimore, but they, certainly have high hopes that trade will end up working out, and that Lattimore, with a full offseason to get healthy, to get more acclimated to a new system, should provide them with Marshawn Lattimore level play. Look, Sanders still and Noah and Lattimore were here already, but adding Jonathan Jones and Trey Amos, and the early returns on Amos are, no one said they felt like they blew it. It's hard to tell. They just look better at corner on paper. That's what I would say we've learned. We've learned that they're probably better equipped to cover people this year with the corners they have on the roster versus the corners they had on their roster last year. So, what do we think we know heading into 2025? I think we know that they've got a top five-ish kind of a quarterback. They have a really good coaching staff, that the offensive line is improved and should be better. In fact, I think of the new things, that's what I would feel most confident about, that they made a conscious effort to get bigger on defense. They got bigger on defense. How that plays out in terms of production, time will tell, but they did get bigger up front on defense. And corner is a position that looks a lot better right now than it did a year ago. What are the things that we still don't know? Look, I'm not even going to partake in the conversation of, we don't know if Jaden will suffer a sophomore slump season. I mean, maybe he will. Maybe he won't. I don't think he will. I think the odds, putting that onto a list of things that we don't know at this point, is really reaching. There are other things that are more obvious that we don't know. And it starts with big picture. We don't know if they've improved themselves defensively. We know that they need to improve defensively from where they were last year, but we don't know right now whether or not this will be an improved defense. I just said that they got bigger defensively, but we don't know that it manifests itself into better point of attack, better at taking on double teams, better at handling gaps, better at stopping the run, better at handling the run on the edges. We're talking about C gap and outside of that where they really got hurt last year. We don't know if they're better on defense overall. Specifically, we don't know if they've improved themselves as a run defense team. And there's so much that goes into that. So much that we don't even understand. Like the nuanced variability of defense year to year. There's no real obvious explanation for why a defense can be horrible one year and then the next year be massively improved without a lot of personnel changes. It happens. Without a coaching change, it happens. Defense is so much more variable year to year than offense. Bringing these guys back for year two in the same system may be the difference between being horrible, which they were last year, and being adequate, being average. If they had an average run defense last year, may have made a difference. I mean, again, it's interesting the way the season played out. It's like, oh my God, they got run on again, but they won. They got run on again, but they won again. Well, we know how that was happening. That was happening with an offense and a quarterback that just would not let them lose, and they kept winning games. But ultimately, when you got to the game to get to the Super Bowl, on the first play from scrimmage, Saquon Barkley was off to the races 60 yards for a touchdown. And Philadelphia could have named their point total and yardage total in that game. They had 55 and close to 500 yards. They could have certainly, if they had needed it, gotten a lot more. Will Washington's offense end up being its best defense in 2025? That would be problematic, at least on paper, heading into the year because of the teams that they're playing and the quarterbacks they're playing and the opposing offenses that they will face. You've got Jordan Love in week 2. You have Justin Herbert in week 5. You got Patrick Mahomes in week 8. You've got Jared Goff and the Lions in week 10. And the list keeps going on and on. You've got a different setup this year. It could play out that they get good fortune and they catch teams at the right time and they catch teams that are down a few key players when they end up playing them. But what we don't know at this point, regardless of OTA days, minicamp days, a draft, free agency, we don't know if they got better on defense. I think they got bigger on defense. I think their corners, certainly on paper, look better on defense, but we don't know if they got better on defense. We don't know if this will be a better defensive team. By the way, it's very possible that they could end up being a better defensive team next year, but give up more or give up the same because of the competition level they're playing. Last year's best defense was their offense, the possession of the football, the not punting, the not turning it over, the scoring on most possessions. I mean, there was that stretch where they didn't punt for like 2.5 games, and they scored on almost every possession. Their fourth down percentage is staying super high, keeping possession of the ball. But to win the whole thing, I think we all feel, I do, like it's hard to overcome what they had last year to win another 12 in the regular season and then win 3 in the postseason to get there. Specifically, run defense, and we certainly don't know if they're any better as a pass rush team. In fact, you could make the argument that they'll be a lesser pass rush team. By the way, I'm assuming that you guys saw some of the news from over the weekend in Cincinnati. Trey Hendrickson and the Bengals are starting to talk. Hendrickson's going to end up a Bengal, more likely than not, I would think. What else don't we know? Defense as a whole, specifically run defense, and by the way, the ability to rush the passer. We don't know if they got more dynamic offensively. We wanted more speed. We wanted more playmaking ability. We think that they got more dynamic by the addition of Deebo Samuel, but we can't be entirely sure because the last time we saw Deebo Samuel, he was not available, and when he wasn't 100%. And look, the team around him had something to do with that. But one of the things we went into this offseason thinking they needed was another big-time playmaker to add an even more dynamic element to what has already become, under Jaden Daniels, Cliff Kingsbury, et cetera, a dynamic offense. I don't know that for sure. I feel like Deebo in a contract year is going to be a major addition and is going to add another dynamic element, but we can't be sure of it. Lastly, even though they went out there and they signed a kicker that at times has been a decent kicker in Matt Gay, we don't know that the kicking situation for sure is going to be any better than it's been, because Matt Gay, remember, last year ended up in Indianapolis, missing 6 kicks of 50 or more yards on the season. He was very ineffective from long distance. So we'll see. They certainly wanted more stability at kicker. We had the whole situation of multiple kickers last year. They wanted stability. We'll see if they got it in Matt Gay. We don't know for sure. All right, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. We've now got the offseason in the books. Training camp is the next time this team will convene. It's the next time, more likely than not, we'll hear from coaches and players at the very end of July. We're into, 12-week or less countdown to the regular season. It can't get here fast enough. We are now, basically a month and a half away from their first preseason game and their first, inter team workouts with the New England Patriots in Foxborough. What do you think for sure? And what do you think you don't know that we still have to wait on, probably until games start to get played, to find out? Phone lines are open, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980, theteam980.com. We are free and live on the Odyssey app. Don't forget, you can watch us on our 980 YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button and hit the like button when you get there.
All right, yesterday, the Boston Red Sox made a blockbuster trade, sending third baseman Rafael Devers to the San Francisco Giants in exchange for 3 pitchers, Kyle Harrison, Jordan Hicks, and minor league pitcher Jose Bello. Also included in the deal was outfield prospect James Tibbs. The Red Sox sent Kyle Harrison down to AAA Worcester. J.J. Spawn wins his first career major with a monster 64-foot putt after a soggy day at Oakmont. That's the longest putt made of the day. Spawn wins the U.S. Open. Shohei Ohtani will make his pitching debut tonight versus the Padres, 21 months removed from his second UCL surgery. Ohtani will likely only pitch 1 or 2 innings tonight as a continuation of his rehab. And Joey Chestnut, the Glizzy Gobbler, returns to the Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest nearly 1 year removed from his Netflix head-to-head matchup versus Takeru Kobayashi. Joey Chestnut is looking to break his record of 76 hot dogs in just 10 minutes. The Nats have dropped 8 in a row following a sweep by the Miami Marlins. They take on the Rockies tonight on 106.7 The Fan. Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 6:15. First pitch is at 6:45. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1 and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
So the offseason is over. I mean, there could still be, I guess, maneuvers, roster moves between now and the beginning of training camp. There might be. But for the most part, we know what we know now about the 2025 team heading into the season. Certainly when we get to final cuts, there could be cuts made and ads made. But we know what they did. We know what they were focused on. And so I'm asking you at 301-230-0980, what do you think you know about this team, and what do you think still needs to be figured out about this team? For me, I mean, we know that the quarterback situation is a really good situation. I think we know that the coaching situation is pretty damn good. Specific to the things that they worked on since, the Philadelphia loss in the NFC title game, I think it's pretty obvious that the offensive line is improved and should be good. The addition of Tunsil, the drafting of Connerly Jr., which we don't know a lot about at this point, just because he was taken in the first round and just because nice things have been said about him as of now, there's no knowing for sure until the games start. But Tunsil, Connerly Jr., moving Coleman inside, replacing Allegretti eventually, depending on when Cosmi is available. The O-line, I think we know, is improved and should be a lot better than it was. We know that they're bigger up front defensively. The additions of Kinlaw and Goldman and Wise, and they're bigger. There was a conscious effort to get bigger up front, probably with the idea of being better against the run. Most of the gashing took place on the edges, outside the interior. But they got bigger. We know that on defense. And I think that the additions of Amos, certainly the addition of Jonathan Jones, a veteran player, that they're probably better at corner going into this season than they were last year. That's what I would say we know. All right, 5 things. Quarterback's really good. Coaches are pretty damn good. O-line improved, should be better. Bigger on defense, and corner looks better. What don't we know at this point? There's still a lot. We don't know if this team has improved defensively. Just because they got bigger doesn't mean we know for sure that they improved. Specific to improvement defensively is, are they going to be better as a run-stopping team? Because they need to be. Are they going to be able to rush the passer? They lost their number one pass rusher sack-wise in Dante Fowler Jr. I would also, and I didn't say this in the first segment, I forgot to, but is Will Harris for, Jeremy Chin, is it a net plus, net minus, or net, equal? We don't know until they start playing games. I don't think we know if they're more dynamic offensively. I have a gut feel that they will be. Year 2 in the system, more Cliff Kingsbury creativity with a second-year quarterback, and of course the addition of Deebo Samuel. And then I threw in at the very end, this was a team that had 4 different kickers last year. Austin Seibert, Zane Gonzalez, Greg Joseph kicked in a game, Cade York kicked in a game. Did they find stability at kicker with the signing of Matt Gay? We don't know for sure. We hope that that's the case, but we don't know for sure. 301-230-0980. What do you know heading into the next time we see them together? And what don't you think you know at this point? Let's start with our guy, Paulie. Paulie, go ahead.
Hell to the W. Sheehan, what's going on, big guy?
What's up, Paulie? Where you been?
Hey, man. I've been out here, man. Happy Father's Day to you, man. Happy belated Father's Day to you, man.
You too.
Hey, yeah. But I'm going to say this. You said a lot of good things. I'm going to tell you what I know is that this team is going to be physical. We're going to be a physical team, defensive-wise, and they're going to be prepared. That's one thing I felt last year, week in and week out. We was prepared to play. Whether that's way we attacked or even you talk about the run defense, but in the second half, they did a good job with adjustments and slowing down the bleeding. I think we finished 18th in total defense or whatever. So
we
gave up a lot on the running game. Was it like
And not
18, 19,
total
something like that?
defense,
It was like
not
18, 19,
total
something like that.
defense,
It was-
total defense. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
run
total
defense
defense.
was 24th or 25th, right?
Yeah. So my point is that they did a good job with making adjustments in the second half. And we were famous for adjustments under Joe Gibbs, and we hear about this of every coach after Joe Gibbs that we didn't make adjustments. So this team did a good job of making adjustments in the second half last year. What we don't know, what I don't know, honestly, is about the running game. All right, because it's going to take time for that line to gel. We got a couple new parts in there. So the line is not going to be as good in week 1 as it's going to be in week 5 or 6. And also our running game was kind of, everybody wants to put it on B-Rob, but I think our running game was kind of predictable last year. And it's okay to be predictable if you have a physical style of running game.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily call our running game physical, So I think I'm curious to see what Kingsbury is going to draw up this year as far as, are we going to do more under center runs, or is it going to be more play action? Or I'm just curious to see how they're going to attack this running game this year, because I don't think it was all the running backs. I think some of it had to do with the scheme also. So I think,
and maybe some of it had to do with the offensive
don't-
line, which is improved. By the way, the DVOA final numbers,
Right.
Washington finished 23rd overall defensively, 26th in the league against the run. Just wanted to,
Okay, so the bottom half of the league is a run. I mean, in defense, 23rd, 32 teams. So
bottom quarter.
half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bottom
But
fifth.
Yeah, so that would be my thing, is the offensive scheme, because teams gonna watch that film. They see, we heard it early and often last year about the college offense. So teams are gonna be ready. So I want to see the adjustments. I don't know about the adjustments of Kingsbury offense, and I'm pretty sure he has some things in mind. But I don't want to be gimmicky. If we're gonna be predictable, let's be more physical style of offense.
Well, I don't think. Look,
That's what I
pace
got,
was
man.
pace was a big part of what they did last year. Thanks, as always, Paulie. Pace was a big part of their offensive attack last year. Tempo, we'll see. Up tempo, I don't know why they would change from that. College offense descriptions are really outdated. So many teams have college offense, if you want to call that, elements to their offense, and that's been the case now, coming up on 15 years almost. I don't really distinguish between college elements and pro elements. I mean, the college elements have become pro elements over the years. We see dual threat quarterbacks throughout the league. We see, zone read as a part of offense. We see RPO as a part of the offense. We see the blended, read option and RPO now as a part of the offense. It's a little bit different at the pro levels we've talked about before than it is at the college level for a lot of reasons, rule wise. 1 yard versus 3 yards before you have ineligible downfield for linemen and hashes. I mean, the college game is different because of the hash marks. But I feel comfortable heading into next year that quarterback and coordinator are going to be and are going to stay, a half step to a step ahead of their defensive counterparts. I would like to see this team become a team that can run the football when it has to with others rather than just the quarterback. I think that that's high risk. It's not that I would ever consider Jaden Daniels to be a quarterback that you don't run. Of course, he's going to be a part of your running game, but he can't lead the team in rushing and in rushing attempts in 10 out of the, last year they ended up playing 20 games. You've got to have a different way of pounding the ball, possessing the ball with your rushing offense rather than just running your quarterback. That's going to be a big thing. And I could have thrown that into the I don't know category, and I probably should have, because there's nothing that they've done other than improve the offensive line, which is a big deal, that should guarantee that they're going to be a much better overall, not just quarterback, rush offense in 2025. 301-230-0980. We've got a line open if you want to weigh in. What do you think about this team now that all of the offseason stuff for the most part, has been completed. We won't see this team together again until the beginning of training camp. What do you think you know? What are you confident about? And what do you still need to learn heading into 2025? Billy and Chantilly, go ahead.
Kevin, good morning.
What's up, Billy?
What I would say is you've got the best rookie quarterback I've ever seen. That's what I know. The other thing that I definitely know is that wide receivers in the NFL are prima donnas. That is loaded with prima donnas. And we have a warrior guy in Terry who's as tough and as playmaking as any of the other guys in the NFL. And I know he's not matching on that class 1A level, but he's a 1B. And I'd make him the highest paid wide receiver in the league right now. I just put it out there, make him the highest paid receiver. And
you can't do that. He's going to be 30 years old.
You set the standard for what your expectations are for the wide receiver position at this football team. Because the one thing that I would worry about with Jaden, and there's very few, besides getting nicked up, is you get some prima donna wide receiver in here that complains about not getting the ball enough, and nothing would ruin the culture faster at football team than getting
what's
prima
interesting,
donna
Billy, and keep Billy on the phone line. I'll come back to you here in a minute. When you look at the best receivers in the game, there are actually several that have, a similar personality like Terry. Justin Jefferson's not a problem at all. Puka Nacua is not a problem at all. Mike Evans really isn't a problem at all. There are other guys in the league that are elite level, high level wide receivers. Terry's not the only anti-diva wide receiver in the game. The stereotype of the position is that they're all, if you don't get me the ball, I'm going to disrupt the entire, locker room. And they're not all that way. Some are, no doubt. Some are. A.J. Brown can be a problem. CeeDee Lamb's been a problem. Tyreek Hill has been a problem. I'm sure I'm forgetting some obvious ones here. But a lot of them aren't, interestingly, when you look at that list. But go ahead, Billy, finish up.
None of those guys have won anything, though. Terry got us all the way to the championship game.
Uh-huh. Right.
I don't want any prima donna
Puka
receivers.
Nacua didn't Nacua win a Super Bowl or not?
Didn't A.J. Brown win a Super
No.
Bowl?
I didn't mention A.J. Brown in the non-diva
True.
wide receivers.
He's reading books on the sidelines. I'll do without a guy reading books on the sidelines. Thanks.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the culture's good. The other thing I don't know, I'd make.
Didn't
Terry
Mike Evans win a Super Bowl?
That's what I do.
I think Mike Evans won a Super Bowl.
Sure did.
Yeah.
Mike Evans did not win a Super Bowl.
Yes, he did with Tom Brady.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
listen, Billy, you're great because you never let the facts get in the way of your very, very
not a bad
definitive stories. What?
Opinions. These are my opinions. Make him the highest paid receiver. That's all. Set the standard for the culture. And then the other thing is, I don't know what the culture is going to be. I look really freaking finally after 2+ decades looking forward to football season.
Yeah. I don't know. Last year I was really looking forward to it as well. I couldn't wait to see what 5 would do. And obviously you did not disappoint. Thank you, Billy.
Not as much.
Appreciate it. You cannot, and they won't. And this is part of the rub right now, is you're not going to make Terry the highest paid receiver in the game. That means just over $40 million a year, because that's what Jamar Chase got paid. No, that's not happening with Terry. And I do think that we'll get a deal done between now and the beginning of camp. I haven't come off that. I think it's fair to say that a lot of the discussion and even the reporting about there being some level of, angst, of, confrontation, of frustration is probably fair at this point. And I think it deals probably with age and where Terry kind of believes he is. But no, Jamar Chase makes $40 million a year. You're not paying Terry McLaurin entering his early 30s $40 million a year. I think it will fall in that $30 million per year category. I think that's exactly where we're going to end up, somewhere around $30 million per year, somewhere in that, 90 to $110, $120 in aggregate, 70, something like that guaranteed. People have pointed to the Ayuk deal. They pointed to the DK Metcalf deal. I think a little bit less than Metcalf and maybe a little bit more than Ayuk, something like that, when all is said and done on deals. Yeah, it's interesting to just kind of look at the roster. I do think that there is an element of, the conversation this time of year of, what do we know? What don't we know? The thing that we know for sure more than anything else, and it's not even close, there's not a close second, is we know that they've got a very, very talented, competitive, winning quarterback. That's what they have. That's if you only wanted to know one thing about your football team entering a season, that would be the one thing to know. And that's the best news that we've had entering a season. The best sort of overall disposition we've had for years, and it's because of him. And those that want to say premature, what are you talking about? You can't make a guy after a rookie year top 5 quarterback. You must not have watched closely enough. He literally carried the football team last year to 14 wins. They were good in areas. Terry was sensational. Zach Ertz came up big in a lot of games. You had a couple of outstanding defensive performers, even though the defense wasn't good, in Luvu and in Wagner for sure. Sanders still was outstanding as a rookie. You had moments from other guys offensively. Certainly De'Ami Brown had some moments. You don't have him back. Eckler, I thought when they were really humming offensively, I thought it was when Eckler was healthy earlier in the season. But there isn't anything that we know more about this football team than really 2 things. One, Dan's not there anymore and ownership is better. But 2, they have a high level, talent-wise, skill-wise, competitive level-wise, work ethic-wise, team character-wise quarterback. It's an amazing thing to say, but we know we have that going into his second year. And so it's incumbent upon front office to build around that and for the coaching staff to coach up around that, to create a team that is legitimately a Super Bowl contender, because they have a quarterback that should be leading a Super Bowl contending team. All right, when we come back, there was some interesting Nats developments over the weekend. Root Cause, the manager, and some of the things he said about the team's effort here during a now 8-game losing skid. Andrew Golden covers the Nats for the Washington Post. He'll join us next.
the offense as a whole. I think you guys haven't produced like you wanted to this month. For you, how much of that is on the players, on coaching?
It's never on coaching. Never on coaching. Okay, coaches work their asses off every single day. We're not going to finger point here and say it's coaches. It's never on the coaches. Okay, they work hard. The message is clear. All the work is done prior. So sometimes they got to go out there and they got to play the game. It's always been about the players. Always. I played this game a long time. Never once have I blamed the coach for anything. I mean, we worked our asses off to get better. They gave us information and we used it. So these guys understand what the game is, man. These coaches, I never had such a group of coaches that worked as hard as they do. I mean, they're here freaking diligently. They go over everything. They sit with players every day. These coaches, they work their asses off. So, and I know every coach's staff is like that. So, sometimes, then the players don't. Sometimes, you got to put the onus on the players. They got to go out there and they got to play the game and play the game the right way. We can't hit for them. We can't catch the balls for them. We can't pitch for them. We can't throw strikes for them. They got to do that.
Dave Martinez, that was after their Saturday loss to the lowly Marlins 4-3. They lost again yesterday 3-1. They've dropped 8 in a row, the Nationals have. And Dave Martinez says it's never on coaching, never on coaching. Coaches work their what's off every single day. It's never on the coaches. Closed quote. Got a lot of attention, those comments. Probably not the best form of communication during a 7-game losing streak. Let's not forget, Dave Martinez managed the Washington Nationals to its only World Series title in 2019. And since it's been a struggle, his overall record, 8 seasons as the team's manager, is .493 and .609. Joining us right now to talk about not only Dave Martinez's comments, but the elevation of Brady House now to the big league team and a few other things is Andrew Golden. Andrew does a great job covering the Nats for the Washington Post. You can follow Andrew on X, on Twitter, at Andrew C. Golden. So let's start with the manager's comments on Saturday. Any fallout from them?
Yeah, I think there was some fallout. I heard and I reported yesterday that there were some players who were upset by the comments and who were not happy. The term I heard was pissed. And so obviously it was not received very well. And obviously it's a little bit tough to have your manager say that. I think, what Davey was trying to get across is that, players have to execute. And I do think there is some validity to that, obviously. But I think that the way that you present it, the way that you say it, and also who you say it to, means a lot. So definitely some fallout and a little bit of a tough situation that the Nationals are currently navigating as they're experiencing an 8-game losing streak.
So did any of the fallout include a reaction from Mike Rizzo or ownership?
We haven't heard anything in terms of any reaction from Mike Rizzo or ownership. That I did notice that Mike Rizzo was around yesterday in the clubhouse, more talking to players. He's typically in the clubhouse, but not talking to players in their lockers as much as I noticed he was yesterday. I haven't heard anything in terms of ownership, but I do know that Mike Rizzo was around yesterday. Some of the front office was around, and so that was obviously something that was interesting given the fallout of what happened on Saturday.
Andrew, after these comments were made and you hearing and reporting that, the players were, quote, pissed, close quote, did he walk them back at all yesterday, either privately or publicly?
Yes, publicly. I did ask him, how do you hope the players will respond to it? He said that he talked to a lot of the players and that his comments weren't about them. And I think what he said was, he said, I never mentioned anything about the players. I appreciate those players. I played. I understand how hard this game is. They know that it's a difficult game. These guys are out there playing hard. We have to do the little things. As I talk about, we got to start doing the little things. We'll start winning some of those games. So I followed up with him and kind of asked, well, if it wasn't directed at them, who was it directed at? He was saying it wasn't directed at the players, and his comments weren't directed at the players. But obviously, if you read the comments on Saturday, he specifically said that the onus is on the players. And so there definitely was some pushback there. And so, but he did kind of walk back the comments, trying to say that his intentions were not to make it about the players, but obviously the comments on Saturday were pretty telling.
What do you think his state of mind is? You're with the team, you cover the team. Is this frustration? Is this him feeling some pressure of maybe job jeopardy with future employment? Where do you think this came from?
Well, I think as my colleague Chelsea James reported earlier this year, is that they had to pick up his contract. So there's a team option to pick up his contract by July. So I think that certainly plays into it. But I think it is some frustration. I think the reality is that the Nationals believe that they had a chance to compete and contend and compete for and be more competitive than they have been in the last few seasons. So I think you're just feeling some frustration of they're not producing the way that they know that they can. I think the team has the talent to be better than what they're playing to right now. It's just very uncharacteristic of them to be struggling in this way, losing this many games, and not scoring many runs. I mean, their offense has struggled at times, but for this prolonged stretch, has really been, I think, frustrating for the group as a whole. I think they all know they can perform better, and so I think these comments are just a result of a little bit of frustration with just how the season's going to this point.
Just tell me real quickly, Andrew. You said that they can pick up the option for another year on his contract. What is the state of his contract right now? For another year,
they can pick up his option. They can pick up his contract for another year. So that deadline is in July.
So for 2026, he's not under contract for 2026. He's managing in the final year of his deal.
Yes, with a potential option for 2026, a team option for 2026, or a club.
How
option.
unusual is that? Manager gets to a final year of his deal without any sort of additional, guarantee.
I don't think that's particularly unusual per se. I think it's obviously seeing how the season plays out, and obviously seeing how the rebuild unfolded. And so I believe he did that before, and he got the contract extension during the 2023 season. So I don't think it's particularly unusual per se. So I don't think it's anything different than what it typically is.
What's interesting is, they are now 11 games under 500 with this 8-game losing skid. And by the way, losing and getting swept by Miami at home is, not a good look as part of it. But going into this stretch of these games against the Mets, they were, 2 or 3 games under 500. They'd been playing well. They had that, 2-0 win over Texas with, Patrick Corbin actually pitching, I think, a complete game for Texas on the other side.
Yeah.
And there was just a week and a half ago, this sense that this was actually an overachieving team, right or wrong?
Yeah, I think they were showing signs they were trending in the right direction, right? I think they came off the Seattle series and the Diamondback series, and they scored, double-digit runs in a few of those games, and they were firing on all cylinders. And then the calendar just turned to June and just hasn't really been there. I think they hung around with the Cubs for the most part, who are one of the best teams in baseball. And there was okay, yes, they lost 2 out of 3, but they're playing well. And the Rangers, they've been struggling offensively too. And they lost 2 out of 3, and it was okay, they still hung around. They were in those games. And even the Mets, and I think that's also part of the tough part too, is they're really close in a lot of these games, and if one or two things go in a different direction, maybe they're back on track. I think that's what the tough part's been too. In the Mets game on Tuesday, I mean, they had the lead until the 8th inning, and then if one thing goes a different way, then maybe they win that first game. I think it's just been tough as well that they've been so close, and you can see that they have the potential to play with some better teams. They're just not executing in those particular moments.
Yeah, the Met game, they took that 4-2 lead into the 8th, I think it was. And then that bat you get you had Starling Marte down 0-2 with 2 outs, and then you walk Marte. You have Soto 0-2, and you throw him a slider over the plate, and then Robert Hassel couldn't make the play in right field. Everything just kind of falls apart. It was they were so close to winning that game, doing everything right, and then a couple of at bats don't go their way, and everything kind of falls apart. I'm not to go back to a game over a week ago, but I talked about that game a little bit because I had actually watched that game. And he pitched again yesterday and pitched great. Mackenzie Gore has been incredible, especially over 5 out of his last 6 starts or something like that. But did you think that Davey pulled him unnecessarily in that game against the Mets? He pulled him in the 7th. I think he had, I'm going back to look at it right now, but it was 80-something pitches. He had retired the side in order the inning before. And I thought he should have come out for the 7th. What did you think? I know that's going back a ways now.
Yeah, that was a tough call. I think obviously you don't want to overtax these guys in the front of the season. Maybe if it's deeper in the season, maybe he goes a little bit longer. But also you're facing the Mets, and it's there is an argument to make that you're facing the Mets, you need a win badly. You have your ace on the mound who has honestly just been a Cy Young candidate. I think I would argue he's been a Cy Young candidate. Like, you want to leave that guy out there. Like, that's your best guy, you know? And so, I think there definitely is an argument to make to leave McKenzie in the game there with his pitch count where it was. But, don't know the full context of the situation, and maybe, what's McKenzie's dealing with, if there are things going on, like what was the decision making there? Obviously we don't know the full context, but at least based on what you explained, like, it would have made sense for McKenzie to go out there for the 7th inning.
You just said something. Is he a legitimate Cy Young candidate in the National League?
I absolutely think so. I mean, his strikeout numbers up there with some of the best in the game. His ERA, like, even yesterday, like, you look at his outing, he didn't have his best stuff, but he allowed 2 runs over 6 innings. And hung in there. I mean, you look at statistically, I mean, he's up there with some of the best guys in the game. He's a sub-3 ERA. He's striking out over 10 guys per 9 innings. I mean, he's been lights out for most of this year. So I legitimately think he should be in that conversation. I think, also part of that is your team is playing well, and so I think that probably will hurt his case. But I think I put him up there with a lot of the starting National League pitchers this year for just how good he's been.
Who is right now? I haven't pulled up the odds. I'm just curious. Is Skeens, Wheeler, who's the favorite right now? I mean, we're so early in the season, but I'm curious as to whether or not he is among those being, odds wise that he's in the hunt. Because to your point, he leads all pitchers, National League, American League, the big leagues in strikeouts with 119. His whip is outstanding. His WAR's outstanding. He's, you talked about, some of the other numbers. His ERA is at 2.89, fallen significantly. I mean, all-star first. Abrams, Wood, and Gore all have a really good chance of being National League All-Stars. I mean, at this point, yeah.
I think I'm looking at the odds right now. It's Skeens, Wheeler, Yamamoto, Sale, Webb, and Gore. So, like, Gore is the highest odds at the moment. I'm looking at Fox right now. So, like,
sixth best.
He's been that good. He's been that good, and so I like you mentioned, I think James Wood should certainly be All-Star. It's a matter of whether he starts or not. Mackenzie Gore, I think, is good of the case as anybody to be an All-Star starter. I think C.J. Abrams obviously is tough at shortstop. There's just a lot of guys in that mix. Obviously, Ellie, Lindor, like you name those guys. But C.J. Abrams in that mix too. So I think those three have been special so far this year.
I'm looking at those odds now. I just found them. So Gore, like at 30-1. Skeens is a pretty heavy favorite right now at -180. We are talking to Andrew Golden. Andrew does a great job covering the Nats for the Post. Okay, so they did make some news yesterday calling up Brady House. He's been terrific in AAA. So what, this process and bringing him up, where will he play? Does he give him a strong bat from, the right-handed spot that maybe they don't have? Talk a little bit about Brady House's call-up.
Yeah, I think this is, obviously given what happened this weekend, I think this is a very exciting day for the Nationals. I think Brady House is a really talented player who obviously was a first-round pick back in 2021, and he has risen to the minor league system. He was injured his first year, and the past couple of seasons has really improved, and this year has been his best year yet. What you're going to get is when he makes contact and puts the ball in play, like, he's going to hit it hard, but he chases out of the zone a little bit more than the average hitter, and so that's something to watch, is how he adjusts. And how pitchers adjust him at the big league level. But I think he's going to get every chance to play third base and be their everyday third baseman. As you mentioned, he'll provide a right-handed bat in their lineup. They're very left-handed heavy. And so I think that Brady, if he performs well, the goal will be for him to be in the middle of the order there. But obviously you don't want to rush him into it per se. But I think he has the potential to be a really talented player and a guy who can be an impact power bat for the Nationals.
Are we going to see Cade Cavalli soon or not?
I think we will. I think the key for him is, like, I think he's pitching well right now, but I think the key is just making sure that he can repeat those things consistently over the games, making sure his mechanics are sound, and making sure that once he gets to the big league level, he can pitch for the rest of the season. So we don't have any sense of when exactly that will happen, but I think it will hopefully come soon for the Nationals, and hopefully once he gets to the big league level, the goal is for him to pitch the rest of the season. And so I think that's what the Nationals are very focused on.
All right. Let's finish up by going back to Davey Martinez again, because I'm just wondering, with Colorado coming to town starting tonight for a 4-game set after losing 3 to Miami. So we are talking about 2 pretty bad baseball teams. The Marlins, came into this thing, I think 16 games under 500 when they got to Washington. The Rockies are 14-57. They are the worst team in baseball, and it's not even close. Could a bad 4-game series against Colorado, let's just say they lose 3 of 4, could that put Davey in trouble midweek?
I think so, given how the Rockies are playing. Like, I think the Nationals need to have a really dominant series, and they are better than the Colorado Rockies. There's no doubt they're better than the Colorado Rockies, and they need to play like it and win those games. So I do think that if there is another bad series and they aren't able to take advantage of that, I think that would have definitely the impact on Davey Martinez and his job security. I'm not guaranteeing or saying that they would, let him go. I mean, I don't know if that's the case, but I do think they need to go out here and have a good performance and show that they're past it. And so I think that's why you're seeing them make the move for Brady House and Dalen Lyle, is to get a spark so that way they can get things going. But they are better than the Colorado Rockies, and they need to show that this week.
Yeah, I mean, the Rockies are horrific. I mean, potentially trending towards all-time bad. And they're not playing in Denver where things get weird. They're playing here over the next 4 nights. And, I'm just curious. I'm sure you've thought about this, and I'm not trying to fire Davey Martinez. I like Davey. He's done a nice job, and there haven't, necessarily been a lot of weapons to produce much better results provided to him. They're all doing their best given the ownership situation. But have you thought about who might replace him? Is there anybody obvious that would replace him if they got swept by the Rockies or lost 3 or 4 to Colorado?
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody who's obvious. And I'll be real, I really have not thought about who would replace him per se, but I don't think that there is an obvious candidate. I mean, as you mentioned, I mean, I don't think that I think this is important too, is, contextualizing the hitters and their offense. Like, this isn't all on Davey Martinez. It's not all on the hitters or the coaches. Like, I think it also involves the fact that, like, the guys that he's been given the past couple of years, like, they've been fringe guys who were free agents who were on, like, their, bounce back candidates, and a lot of them worked out because they were bounce back candidates, right? And so it's like you can only do so much. Like, it's possible that those bounce back candidates have success. It's also possible that they're bounce back candidates for a reason, right? And so I think, like, you can't fully blame Dave Martinez for some of the hitting production, given that he's been given, a roster given the Nationals' limited budget because of ownership. So I don't think you can fully blame him. But I haven't thought too much about who can replace them. I don't think there's going to be a person who comes in and completely elevates them and turns the season around. Like, I think I don't know if that's necessarily the case, and so I don't know if that really makes sense to make a firing in hopes of getting a spark for a team that is going to be well below 500. But I'm sure there are options out there, but I haven't had a real thought about who exactly could replace him, who would elevate the team, if that makes sense.
All right, we'll finish up with a non-Nats question because there was a massive trade yesterday in baseball. Just talk about what the Giants and Red Sox pulled off yesterday and your thoughts on it.
Yeah, it was a pretty crazy trade. Obviously, the Red Sox wanted to build around Rafael Devers for years, and I think that maybe all of us kind of downplayed how bad that relationship had kind of frayed over time. So I was shocked, and I was trying to text a friend who covers the NFL, and he was like, "What's the equivalent of this?" And I was trying to explain it in NBA terms. It's not Luka Doncic's level. I don't think that Devers is Luka Doncic's level, but in terms of the shock and surprise, I think it's kind of up there. I think for the Giants, it's good because they struggle to sign free agents, and so you have a guy that's locked in for years to come who that you can rely on. How long he'll have his peak, given that he's already a DH and already declining a little bit, like, it kind of remains to be seen. But I think he'll be an impact player in the Red Sox. I think have an opportunity because the Giants took on all of his contract to reallocate those resources and try to sign some more free agents. So it should be interesting to see. I think the Red Sox have to take that money and use it elsewhere for this trade to be good for them. But I think for the Giants, it's a really good trade to get a superstar that they might not have gotten in free agency.
I lied. I got one more for you. Have the Orioles kind of turned things around? I mean, are they any sort of threat to end up having a much better season than a month ago would have indicated?
Yeah, they're definitely playing better. I mean, can they turn it all the way around to make the playoffs? I mean, I don't know, but they definitely have played better. And so, sometimes, maybe a midseason change is helpful to turn things around. And so I guess for the Orioles, it's worked out pretty well. And maybe that was the spark that they needed to get things back on track. So, sometimes in-season firings can be beneficial.
Yeah, I think they've won like 14 out of their last 18 or 19, something like that. Andrew, thanks. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Andrew Golden, everybody, at Andrew C. Golden on X, on Twitter. David Martinez, look, it's just not, you can't say that. He might not be wrong. You can't say that when your team just lost for a 7th game in a row. You can't put your arms up in the air and say, not my fault. Players, they're the issues. That usually doesn't go well for anybody involved, and it sounds like the players weren't happy at all. And look, I don't know, are the Nats, I mean, they don't have to pay him beyond this year. Could they add somebody internally to finish up the season? I would say, I like Davey too, but I would say that with the Colorado Rockies in town for 4 games starting tonight, 4 straight games against the worst team in baseball, you better win 3 of the 4, like when you're in this position. Seems like it would be one of those situations, at least in another market. We'll see if it happens here. All right. Ben Standig was at minicamp all last week. We'll talk to him next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. We're done until training camp. Next time we hear from coaches, players, see videos from practices, start talking about preseason games, it'll be training camp end of next month. Joining us right now, as he does every Monday and Friday, The Athletic's Ben Standig, at Ben Standig on X on Twitter. Ben's got a podcast called Last Man Standig. And, of course, he writes for The Athletic. So, let's just start with a couple of players, because some of these players spoke, and I have not spoken to you since. We learned something about a few players over the 3-day period last week. Let's just start with Lattimore. What did we learn from hearing from him and talking to others about his health and his prospect for being a much better player in 25 than he was at the end of 24?
Yeah, I mean, I think he was, fairly candid about his year last year following the trade. That look, he said, look, I arrived injured. That's not an excuse. If I'm on the field, I gotta go. I gotta make the plays. I didn't do enough of that. He said, watching the tape, he saw a guy that looked timid. He could tell by the way he was kind of moving out there that he looked timid. And obviously, his play, particularly in those playoff games against Tampa Bay and the Eagles, he was not very good. Going up against Mike Evans and A.J. Brown is not easy, but that's why you make a trade for a guy like that. But he said since the season ended, he got himself some good rest. He said he focused on explosive, strength work as opposed to heavy weights in the gym. And he said he feels, pretty good coming into camp. And I thought, again, all the preface everything we see in OTAs and minicamp with, well, actually he wasn't at OTA, but we preface everything with, it's not no pads, it's not the real thing. But he looked pretty competitive out there, all things being equal. And, look, being healthy in June is not the same thing as being healthy week 1 or November or whatever. But at least it's a good start because, last year he came in hurt, he missed 6 of the 8 regular season games. And then, he played in the playoffs, but, wasn't sharp. So if they can have him, a healthy version of him, maybe he's never going to be the Pro Bowl player he once was. Last one, I believe, was in 2021. He was selected 4 times. But, if he's a viable option on the perimeter in a division that has, CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, and others, that goes a long, long way for this group. So I take it as a positive sign. One of my big questions this offseason was, what's he going to look like? Because if he's not ready to go for minicamp, then, boy, that's going to make training camp and beyond much more concerning. So good start on that front. And, I feel like he came in with, ready to go and with a good attitude. So hopefully that all carries over.
Did he say anything about missing all the OTA days or not?
I don't believe so. I mean, that's been kind of his MO in the past. And, he obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but, he clearly had been working out on his own and doing his own thing. So, it is, we all, I think, understand why the coaches would prefer the players all be there. Right. But, he showed up for the mini camp and, I thought he looked pretty good. Like I said, if he had missed all that time coming off the year he had here and then wasn't ready to go, I would have been major red flag for me. But he showed up ready to go, put in the work, seemed to be, sharp. There was one play in particular, just to note, it was, unfortunately, it was right before Noah Brown got hurt the other day, but it was a play where Noah Brown was lined up against Lattimore. Brown had a move where he cut inside, then spun back towards the sideline, and he had a couple steps on Lattimore on the play, and the ball was right there, and it was in Brown's hand, and Lattimore still came up, made the play. Was an aggressive attack on the ball, knocked the ball to the ground. And again, it's only, it is what it is, but that's the type of play you want to see from a guy who you're projecting to be your top corner and be one of the better ones in the league. And, again, if we're going to tout anything that's happening in these camps, to me, that was a play to mention because he didn't just sort of give up on the play. He went for it and made, turned it into an incompletion when it could have been just another, play against him.
Do we know anything about Noah Brown's injury?
We do not. They obviously typically keep things tight, and the fact that, like you said, we're not going to talk to them now until end of training camp. So I guess I would look at it like this. If, when Dan Quinn talked on Thursday, he said that Noah Brown had not yet had an MRI for the injury. Okay. So presumably he's had the MRI since. I would imagine if the MRI was like the worst case scenario, we probably would have heard something by now. That'd be my guess. So, who knows? Maybe it's, whatever it may be. Maybe it is something. Maybe it's something that's not a big enough of a deal to send out red flags or to say, oh boy, we got a problem here. So I'm taking it as a positive at the moment. What that positive means ultimately in terms of training camp, hard to say, but hopefully, that's the proper read on this. If he's out for significant time, if not the year, then you would think they would look to bring some help in at some point. But yeah, the fact that we've heard nothing is actually positive, I would say, at this point.
I agree. You and I have talked a lot about, sometimes fans just forget about last year's draft class and they focus on the most recent draft class. But most draft choices don't have breakout years in their rookie year. They have breakout years in year 2 or year 3 if they end up breaking out at all. So as we look at everybody not named Jaden Daniels and Mike Sanderstill and maybe Brandon Coleman, so we're talking about a list that includes Newton and Sinnott and McCaffrey and McGee and John Baptiste. Did you get a sense at any point in this offseason that they're really confident that one of those players, or maybe more than one, is going to be in position to make major contributions in year 2?
Yeah, I feel like, Jordan McGee would be, I guess, my answer there. Defensive coordinator Joe Witt Jr. talked about the fact that they had some packages for him to be on the field, and unfortunately, McGee just got injuries starting in training camp and then during the season as well, and just kind of limited his play. And then by the time he was even sort of back active, the team was sort of well on its way to having the year that it did, and maybe just wasn't enough time to integrate the rookie like that. But he was the guy that they were really high on last year, drafting him in the 5th round. He's got speed at that linebacker position, which they could use. Look, Bobby Wagner is obviously going to the Hall of Fame, and he does a lot for this team in terms of leadership and instincts and recognizing plays that are coming. But, he's not particularly sharp at this point, at least relative to his career highs as a speed option, as a cover guy. And I'm not saying that means McGee would get in there and take some reps from him. Maybe it just means they use more 3 linebackers in some sets than they did last year. But I think the way they were talking about him, I feel like they see an opportunity for more out of him. Again, maybe that's ultimately, giving them more 4-3 looks. But I think that he would be one from the group that I would point to. And that's not to say that McCaffrey or Sinnott in particular haven't made some strides. I feel like they did. It's just that the opportunity for them, assuming that there's no injuries at receiver, this could be a little bit harder to come by. Whereas with McGee, if he's the 3rd linebacker, then I think there's a chance for him to get out there.
Could you tell anything in watching, like as an example, who they were playing with, whether it was frontline starters or backups or even further down the list, where Chris Rodriguez gets penciled in heading into training camp?
No, not a ton in that regard. Brian Robinson, I think checked off the needed boxes for this time of the year in terms of, showing up in camp. Again, looking athletically sharp. He seems to be on his P's and Q's out there on the field. And obviously based on what we have seen, he would be the lead back, all things being equal. Austin Eckler, Jeremy McNichols filling in as the sort of complementary backs. To a degree. Then you have, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, the rookie, who I think did have a pretty good summer, or not summer, but a pretty good, off-season program for them as well. So Rodriguez slimmed down a bit. He runs hard. We all get that. It's just, I don't know where he's fitting in terms of the depth. Even if they keep 4 running backs, which would be essentially more than they kept last year for the most part, I would think right now it's Krosky Merritt getting that spot as opposed to Rodriguez. So, look, we've talked about before, is there a world where Brian Robinson possibly gets squeezed out either in terms of playing time or maybe even like if they decide to make a bold move and trade him? That's just purely just wondering on my part. In that case, then maybe Rodriguez slips on the roster because they want somebody with that size to give you the short yardage capability, if nothing else. But I think it's going to take something like that at this stage for Rodriguez to have any kind of role. Again, like I've liked him. I think you've probably liked him, but it's just only so many spots. And like I said, I do think he at least came in, I think it with better form, better conditioning than he did a year ago. I'm sure that stood out to the coaches, but it's just going to be hard to see where he's going to fit in if they keep everybody else that's already on this roster still around come week one.
Of course, we are talking to Ben Standig. Staying offense for a moment.
Sure.
Learning that Brandon Coleman will be, side by side with Laramie Tunsil, knowing that Sam Cosmi's coming off an injury. I'm just curious, like when they open up against the Giants on September 7th or whatever day that is, who's the starting right guard if Cosmi's not ready to go? Is that where Allegretti plays? Does Wiley play there? What does the offensive line left to right look like opening day? Best guess right now.
Yeah, I would say, like, if you're talking about playing Coleman on the left side at guard, right?
Right.
Sure, there's a world where Allegretti is just better than him in camp and all that, but you're setting it up to say Coleman's going to be the left guard. That's sort of his job to lose. He's the upside play, all that stuff. So then, based on that, you would think, okay, Allegretti would be the most likely guy to move to the right side. He's obviously, he had a decent year last year. He's got that Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl pedigree that he came over with, so he can play in multiple spots and give you, viable work wherever. I think with the Wiley front, the fact that they've quickly moved Coleman to guard, like we're not having the conversation about is he going to be guard, is he going to compete at right tackle?
Right.
Okay, so now we can just focus on Josh Connerly and Wiley, and I would think that you keep Wiley at tackle for now because, again, we can pencil in Josh Connerly to be the starting right tackle, but we'll see. He's 21, pretty young. He's, coming in the league as a rookie. And the whole point of everything they're doing is to give Jaden Daniels the best opportunity to succeed, not necessarily to have the best offensive line you can in 2026, right? So I think for this year, I'm not saying Connerly won't start, but I think you keep Wiley there in case he needs to be the guy to go in. And also, look, just for pure tackle depth, right? I mean, if Coleman's a guard, not that he couldn't play tackle, but, Wiley is essentially the third tackle at this point with, we'll see about Trent Scott and whoever else they might have. So, I think you keep Wiley at tackle. Allegretti would be the obvious fit. Now, they also have, they signed Nate Herbig, who's been a guy who started in this league on the interior spots, so he could be in the mix for sure. I don't want to rule him out, but I would guess Allegretti at right guard would be my guess as of now. Until Sam Cosmi comes back.
Yeah, it's important for people to understand Josh Connerly Jr., no matter what, how much the part he looks, he's a rookie. It is possible that, they play him, but they play him with Andrew Wiley to start in the first few games of the year until they're comfortable. Let's flip it around to the defensive side of the ball. Did anybody just stand out to you? Like, okay, and I'm talking about the new guys. Well, you can throw in because they did, Daron Payne. But were there any standouts among Kinlaw, Goldman, like, oh, yeah, no, they got it right there. He looks the part. He's big. He looks different than what they've had, and they're playing him on the outside. It's just anything from the defensive side of the ball with the new guys.
I think the biggest thing is just how they look. Again, no pads, no tackling. If Eddie Goldman's a run stuffer, right, it's hard to show what he can do when there's none of that kind of happening. And Javon Kinlaw is a massive guy, but again, until he's out there, it's hard to see exactly how he's going to fare wherever they line him up. But just in terms of size, like, okay, step one, we need to get longer and we need to get bigger, and they did that with Kinlaw and Goldman and Dietrich Wise on top of, having Payne out there. Johnny Newton is not necessarily the biggest defensive tackle in the league. And, like a Dorrance Armstrong is a solid size guy, but, he's a defensive end. He's not that huge presence. So I think, at a minimum, they've now done that. Gives them the opportunity, at least, to be a lot better against the run, to be more disruptive. Ultimately, of course, the talent is going to have to play out. And, Kinlaw, a former first-round pick, he was a surprise signing for most of us because, at least in terms of the numbers that he got, because we hadn't seen that level of production, but they clearly believe that there's a lot there. And, I spoke to him one day out there and enjoyed the conversation. He seemed to be really engaged and really happy that he's there. Of course, he's from this area, and the fact that Adam Peters believes in him enough to sign him, says, I think, something and helps his confidence. But and then you mentioned Payne. Obviously, they were gushing about his work out there, and some of that is on the days that we're not there. There was one where Joe Witt said that he got kind of scolded by Dan Quinn because Payne went out there and was being like overly disruptive in the best ways possible and like messing up the sort of their practice plans. But that's what they want to see ultimately, a guy like that playing at a high level. So I think that's we've talked about that. Deron Payne playing anywhere close to that 2022 level would be massive for this defense. So I think it's just that. It's ultimately, maybe it's the akin of when they get on the bus, they look formidable. That's not, that has to be way more than that come game day. But for now, that's kind of about as much as we can look at. And from that end, I think they did a good job of getting guys. And hopefully, when they start practicing for real with pads and so on, that it shows as well.
So last one, maybe we can talk about Game 5 tonight. I know you're going to be into that as well. But give me the one thing out of the last several weeks and just the offseason in general, actually, post Philadelphia through now, nothing until training camp. What do you feel the most confident about in terms of new? We're confident in Jaden Daniels. We like the coaching staff. We like Terry McLaurin, et cetera. What are you most confident that they, have accomplished here in the offseason?
Well, again, let's see where Lattimore looks come the, training camp in the season. However, if in fact he is, healthy when this all starts, again, he is in June. We'll see about that. But if he's healthy, and then with the addition of Trey Amos, I thought did have a pretty good offseason program. He's got this, we talk about them getting longer and bigger. That's not just on the line. That's also in the secondary, and that's where Trey Amos comes in. Jonathan Jones is a solid vet who's been on the league, played for Super Bowl camp in New England. And then, of course, you've got Sanders still, whether he's ultimately the starting slot or outside, a guy who showed a lot. That it really needs to be emphasized how much better that group is, and at a minimum on paper and at a maximum for real, than a year ago when you had Benjamin St-Juste, Emmanuel Forbes, and Mike Davis as your outside corners, which led to Sanders still having to move outside, which led to the trade for Lattimore. Like, they should be significantly better at corner if everybody is healthy. And, look, we all understand there's questions about the defensive ends and the pass rush perhaps, and cornerbacks, rely on the edges, relies on the pass rush to help their cause, but it goes the other way too. And if they're able to have a steady presence on the perimeter, and that allows Joe Witt to send blitzes as he wants, I think that just goes such a long way to help his defense. So, again, the Lattimore injury situation is going to be one I'm going to have to stay vigilant on. We all will. But if that's right, combined with Trey Amos, et cetera, I think that corner could be a lot better than it was this point last year.
By the way, this is the time of year or coming up soon where you'll write something about a surprise cut. Do you have somebody in mind? Last year, by the way, I think I threw out Benjamin St-Juste as a possibility, but it didn't happen, obviously. But do you have somebody in mind that you'll write about or talk about here soon?
I don't think I do, but not because it's not, somebody will probably be a surprise or multiple somebodies. It's just that, like, the way they set up the roster with their moves in the offseason, they kind of, added enough pieces to get by. And they only had the 5 draft picks, so it's not like they all of a sudden have like a surplus of guys at any spot. I think there'll be some interesting options on the defensive line because they have more bodies than they do likely roster spots. But I don't know if anybody's going to, I don't think anybody's going to be surprised if Sheldon Day doesn't make the team. So I don't know. At the moment, I don't know if I have a surprise.
Sheldon Day would not count.
Yeah, right. I mean, like I said, I think Brian Robinson checked a lot of the boxes. So, he might have been somebody I probably did mention a few weeks ago, but, I don't know if we'd go there now. So I honestly don't think I have somebody today on that front, which is obviously, both good and bad. I mean, I think they have done a good enough job of adding pieces to where they had some concerns, but they also have some younger guys or upside players who can hopefully work out for them. So no, I don't know if I really have anyone right now that would count.
That's all right. Don't force it.
I mean,
something will come to you in the next few weeks, I'm sure. I mean, we might think Allegretti or Wiley or somebody like that as we approach the season. All right, real quickly because I got to run. But who do you like tonight?
Oh man, I feel like the Pacers blew it. This feels like an OKC win. Somewhat comfortably, as comfortably as it can be for a series where it's been pretty tight, pretty competitive. But going back home with the momentum after Game 4, it just feels like the Thunder win. I'm not saying the series is over at that point, but it does feel like the Pacers probably blew their shot to win this thing when they didn't close that in the fourth quarter. So I'd like to see the Pacers win, but both of these teams have been really good. It's been a fun series to watch for sure.
All right. Talk to you later. Thanks.
Awesome. See ya.
Ben Standig, everybody. Caitlin Clark set another standard. And Dak Prescott talking legacy. We'll finish it up with those two things next. Kevin Sheehan Show. The Team 980, theteam980.com. We're free and live on the Odyssey app.
All right, the Boston Red Sox have traded away slugging third baseman Rafael Devers to the San Francisco Giants in exchange for 3 pitchers, Kyle Harrison, Jordan Hicks, and minor league pitcher Jose Bello. Also included in this deal was outfielder prospect James Tibbs. The Red Sox sent Kyle Harrison down to AAA Worcester. J.J. Spawn wins his first career major with a monster 64-foot putt after a soggy day at Oakmont. That's the longest made putt of the day. Spawn wins the U.S. Open. Shohei Ohtani will make his pitching debut tonight versus the Padres. This is 21 months removed from a second UCL surgery. Ohtani will likely pitch only 1 or 2 innings as a continuation of his rehab. Joey Chestnut has announced in a statement on Twitter he is returning to the Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest nearly 1 year removed from his Netflix head-to-head matchup versus Takeru Kobayashi. Chestnut will look to break his record of 76 hot dogs in 10 minutes. The Nats have dropped 8 in a row. Following the sweep by the Miami Marlins, they take on the Rockies tonight. Brady House has been called up and will likely make his debut. The Nats, again, play the Rockies on 106.7 The Fan at 6:45. Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 6:15. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC Sports, and that is what's trending.
So our good friend Sabah sent me she sent me this clearly fake Indiana Fever tweet that says the Fever and the Liberty played a game on Saturday with 20.9 million people watching, the most watched WNBA game in history. Yeah, that would be like the most watched WNBA game history by like 10 times or something like that. No, that's obviously not true, Sabah. Sabah sends me a lot of things from fake and parody websites. I guess, Sabah, they're doing this. You gotta get a little bit more discerning. I think I could go back and find no less than 10 tweets over the last 2 years that she has sent me that have just been from parody websites. But Caitlin Clark set a career mark for herself in the WNBA, making 8 threes. She was outstanding, 32 points in a return in a game that I actually turned on and watched for a while, right at the correct time when she buried 3 logo threes within like 3 possessions. It was pretty exciting. It's about the only WNBA that's worth watching. Hey, real quickly, Dak Prescott said this morning he wants to win championships. The legacy, the things that come from whatever comes after I finish playing will take care of itself, but I want to win a championship. Be damned if it's just for my legacy or if it's for this team, for my personal being, for my sanity. Yeah, the legacy will take care of itself. I have to stay where my feet are. Hey, Dak, stay upright for 17 games and have your team get to the postseason and win more than one game. That would be a start. Championship, they're far from that. Back tomorrow. Chris is next.